I am Lisa Morgan, 32, and I have always been Rebecca's responsible elder sister. We were inseparable growing up, sharing our goals and secrets. When she got engaged, I was overjoyed to be her maid of honor. I put thousands of dollars, many hours, and my entire heart into arranging her perfect day. However, family dynamics are tricky, especially since my mother, Deborah, makes the decisions. I never envisioned the day she would look me in the eyes and say those heartbreaking words. If you're watching from somewhere dealing with family strife, leave a comment, like, and subscribe because this story might just be the inspiration you need. Growing up as Rebecca's older sister, I frequently served as her guardian and mentor. From teaching her to tie her shoes to guiding her through high school drama, I was the one constant in her life she could always rely on. Deborah, our mother, never concealed her favoritism. Rebecca was the golden child, with her artistic abilities and upbeat disposition, whereas I was the realistic one who needed to lighten up. My father Thomas remained on the perimeter of our family dynamics, preferring peace over confrontation whenever Mom's actions crossed the line. As the responsible eldest kid, I naturally took on the role of problem solver for the family. When the roof leaked, I scheduled repairs. When bills piled up, I quietly paid the shortages with my savings. This trend continued into our adulthood, with me financially supporting Rebecca as she pursued her art history degree when our parents' donations fell short. My own route led me to work as a financial consultant at a famous firm in Boston. The irony was not lost on me that, while managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for customers, I was also required to manage my own family's finances. I didn't mind, however. Helping Rebecca reach her goals brought me true joy. When Rebecca met James Wilson at an art gallery opening 3 years ago, I felt they were a fantastic match. James hailed from an affluent family, but he didn't brag about it. He admired Rebecca's artistic perspective and encouraged her professional goals. Their engagement after 2 years of dating came as no surprise. And I was the first person Rebecca phoned, shouting with delight over the phone. "Lisa," he proposed. "You are going to be my maid of honor, correct? I cannot do this without you." Her voice was filled with joy that December morning. "Of course," I promised, already contemplating how I might assist make her wedding dreams a reality. The preliminary planning stages were just what I had envisioned. Rebecca and I spent weekends looking at locations, brainstorming color schemes, and making Pinterest boards full of ideas. I made thorough notes during each session to ensure that her idea became a reality. My apartment became filled with bridal publications and fabric swatches. The first inkling of problems occurred at what should have been a typical family luncheon to discuss wedding costs. Mom arrived with a leather-bound wedding planner, which I had never seen before. Before anyone had even served their salad, she stated, "I've already made deposits on the Clayton Hotel." They only had one date available this summer, so I grabbed it. Rebecca appeared shocked, but happy. "Mom, that is quite generous." But Lisa and I were still comparing venues. "Darling, the Clayton books up to a year in advance. We're happy there was a cancellation." Mom patted Rebecca's hand and shot me a triumphant look. "Besides, I have always pictured your wedding there." This was the first of many judgments made without consultation. Within weeks, Mom had effectively taken charge, transitioning from infrequent participant to wedding dictator. Vendors I had studied were turned down in favor of her friends' recommendations. Rebecca and I had decided on a color scheme, but it was suddenly too bland. "It's fine," Rebecca told me when I expressed my anxiety. "Mom's really enjoying this, and it makes planning easier, and she and Dad are contributing a lot financially," so I bit my tongue and stood back, still helping where I could, but increasingly feeling like an outsider looking in. In one Instagram photo, Megan was holding color swatches against bridesmaid dress options, a task I assumed would be mine as a maid of honor. Megan had always been a part of our family events, with a particular interest in being part of the inner circle. "Rebecca seems closer to Megan these days," I casually mentioned to my boyfriend Tyler one evening as I scrolled through yet another photo of them at a cake tasting. "Maybe it's just because Megan has more free time," Tyler suggested, always the voice of reason. "You've been slammed at work this quarter." I nodded, pushing down the nagging worry that something more significant was happening. After all, Rebecca and I had been each other's constants for 30 years. The detailed discussions about centerpieces and music selections were replaced with quick texts, and Mom was handling it or had already figured it out. Meanwhile, I was still financially contributing to aspects of the wedding, paying the deposit for the photographer Rebecca wanted but Mom thought was too expensive. I ordered custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests and secretly arranged what I hoped would be the perfect wedding gift, a luxury honeymoon to Bali, complete with first-class flights and a private villa with ocean views. I told myself that everything would return to normal after the wedding, and soon my sister and I would laugh about Mom's wedding takeover over wine in her newly married apartment. I didn't realize how wrong I was or how quickly the situation would deteriorate beyond what I ever thought possible. The day I discovered I wasn't invited to Rebecca's wedding dress shopping was like a punch in the chest. I found out through an innocent question from my coworker Natalie, who happens to be friends with the boutique owner. "How was Rebecca's appointment yesterday? Sandra mentioned your sister found the one right away." I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips. "What appointment?" Natalie's expression shifted from excited to uncomfortable. "Oh, at Elegant Moments. Sandra said your mom, sister, and cousin drank champagne for hours. Rebecca and I had talked about wedding dress shopping since we were teenagers, pretending pillowcases were veils and promising to be there for each other's special moments." I escaped to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, trying to make sense of being excluded from such an important moment. I called Rebecca that evening, my voice carefully controlled. "How was dress shopping?" A pause. "Oh, it just happened really quickly. Mom had an appointment, and it wasn't supposed to be the actual shopping day, just a preliminary look with Megan." Another pause. "She was free, and we needed a third opinion." "I could have made myself free," I said quietly. "You could have asked." "Lisa, don't make this a big deal. There will be plenty of other wedding stuff you can be a part of." But the other wedding stuff never materialized. The bridal shower was organized without my input, though I was asked to contribute financially to the venue. Megan took over the bachelorette party planning, which she chose a destination I knew Rebecca wouldn't enjoy. I finalized the honeymoon arrangements, spending $8,600 on first-class flights, luxury accommodations, and special experiences I knew the couple would enjoy, despite the fact that my suggestions, based on 30 years of knowing my sister, were dismissed as no longer being what Rebecca desired. I imagined Rebecca's reaction when I surprised her at the rehearsal dinner, the hug and the rekindling of our sisterly bond. However, the distance between us widened, and Rebecca began declining our traditional Sunday brunches, always with a different excuse. When we did speak, our conversations felt scripted and shallow. I overheard a conversation at a family gathering in May, just 2 months before the wedding, that made my blood run cold. After 3 weeks of increasingly sporadic communication, I finally asked directly, "Is everything okay between us?" She replied, "I'm just super busy with wedding stuff, not quite meeting my eyes. Mom's been amazing handling all the details." I had stepped into the kitchen to refill my water glass when I heard my name from the adjacent dining room. "Lisa's always been difficult," my mother's voice carried clearly, "and Rebecca's finally seeing it now." "It must be difficult for Rebecca," Megan responded, voice dripping with fake sympathy, especially during her wedding, when she should be the center of attention. "That's why we've had to minimize her involvement." For Rebecca's sake, I stood frozen, water overflowing my glass as their words sank in. My own mother was actively working to exclude me from my sister's wedding, painting me as an attention-seeking monster to anyone who would listen. That night, I broke down to Tyler, finally expressing the fears I'd been suppressing for months. Tyler drew me close, his steady presence contrasting with my shaking hands. "That's not possible. You're Rebecca's sister, and you've done nothing but support her." "But what if Mom has convinced her otherwise? You don't know how persuasive she can be, how she twists things." "Then you should speak with Rebecca directly," Tyler stated firmly. "No more guessing, no more hoping it will get better on its own. You need to have a real conversation about what's happening." He had been right. The situation had deteriorated too far for quiet acceptance. I texted Rebecca the following morning. "I need to discuss about the wedding and our relationship. Can we meet tomorrow?" She responded hours later. "Really busy with wedding preparations. Come to Mom and Dad's on Thursday at 7 o'clock. We can chat then." These 5 days were some of the longest of my life. I practiced what I would say and how I would express my pain without blame. I reminded myself that Rebecca might be stuck in the middle, pushed by our mother's assertive attitude. I arrived at our parents' place on Thursday evening, full of optimism for reconciliation and clarity. I had no idea I was going into an ambush that would sever my ties with my family and drive me to reassess what loyalty and self-respect actually meant. As I stopped outside my parents' colonial-style home on Thursday evening, the air felt strangely still. Rebecca and I had played hopscotch on the familiar driveway as children, but it suddenly felt unfamiliar. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, fixed my blouse, and took a deep breath before approaching the front door. Mom responded before I could even ring the doorbell, her look opaque. "We're in the living room," she announced abruptly, turning without waiting for my response. The scene inside seemed manufactured. Dad sat in his customary armchair, looking uncomfortable and gray. Rebecca sat on the edge of the sofa, eyes down, fingers twisting in her lap. Mom stood behind Rebecca, one hand on the sofa back in what appeared to be a protective attitude. Megan sat in my usual seat during family meetings, looking both arrogant and concerned. "What's happening?" I inquired, remained standing when no one offered me a seat. "Rebecca, I thought we were going to discuss the wedding. That is why we are all here." Mom intervened before Rebecca could speak. "There's something you should know about the wedding." A peculiar silence fell over me. I could feel the quiet before the storm approaching. "We've been discussing things," Mom continued, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she'd perfected over decades as a family. "And we all agreed that your participation in the wedding has become problematic." "Problematic?" I repeated, looking squarely at Rebecca, who continued to avoid my eyes. "Your dominating behavior, your need to make everything about yourself," Mom remarked, ticking off points on her fingers like items on a grocery list. "The way you've tried to overshadow Rebecca's special time with your opinions and financial contributions." I felt like I'd gone into an other world. "Rebecca?" I asked, wanting for my sister to speak for herself. She finally looked up, her face a mix of remorse and prepared determination. "It's just been so stressful, Lisa. Every time you become involved, there is friction." "Mom thinks," I said softly. "What are your thoughts, Rebecca?" Before she could respond, Mom came forward, partially separating us. "Rebecca believes that her wedding should be a pleasant occasion. And, frankly, your presence would make this impossible." As she spoke, the room appeared to tilt slightly. "You're referring to my presence at the planning?" Mom's lips twisted into a sneer, joy beaming in her eyes as she finally delivered the blow she'd been planning for months. "We all agreed. You're not welcome at the wedding," she added, enunciating each syllable as if she were tasting excellent wine. "Not as maid of honor, bridesmaid, or visitor. This works well for everyone." The hush that ensued was absolute. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel ticking away, counting seconds in a time that seemed interminable. Dad shuffled in his chair but did not say anything. Megan had the grace to look at the floor, while Rebecca, my sister and best friend since birth, sat silently, thereby terminating 30 years of sisterhood. "I see," I said finally, shocked by the consistency of my own voice. "And when was this decision made?" "We've been moving in this direction for months," Mom replied, clearly pleased with my calm reaction, mistaking shock for acceptance. "Rebecca asked Megan to be her maid of honor weeks ago. We just needed to make it official." I turned to Megan, who now met my gaze with a challenging look. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "It's nothing personal," she replied, the lie transparent. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Nothing personal about replacing me in my sister's wedding, in my sister's life. "Rebecca," I tried one more time. "Is this really what you want?" Mom responded again. "Rebecca wants a drama-free wedding. You've always been too controlling, too opinionated. Everything has to be your way. The venue wasn't nice enough, and the caterer wasn't up to your standards." "That's not true, and you know it," I said, feeling the first break in my calm exterior. "I've supported every decision, even when I wasn't consulted. I've contributed thousands of dollars without being asked." "See, there it is," Mom said. "Throwing your money in our faces and using your financial contributions to control the wedding, that's exactly why you can't be there." I stared at my father, silently pleading with him to say anything, anything. He caught my gaze briefly before looking away, his lifelong habit of avoiding conflict taking precedence. Even now, a peculiar peace has crept over me. Then came a moment of clarity that sliced through the hurt and bewilderment. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not something that could be resolved with a heartfelt conversation. This was a carefully planned exclusion. Months in the making. Good to know, I answered simply. I turned and proceeded towards the door, my steps mechanical. Rebecca spoke my name quietly behind me, but there were no footsteps. Nobody tried to stop me. The drive home was a haze. Street lights smeared like watercolors, and unexpected tears streamed down my cheeks. I pulled over twice because the road became too hazy to drive safely. My phone buzzed with incoming texts, but I couldn't force myself to read them. When I arrived at my apartment, Tyler was there, his expression full of hopeful expectation that collapsed the moment he saw me. "What happened?" he asked, eagerly grabbing me into an embrace. The entire story came out in incoherent chunks between sobbing. The ambush, Mom's nasty sneer, Rebecca's treachery, Dad's quiet, Megan's victory. "They can't do this," Tyler murmured as I concluded. His tone was one of outrage. "You're her sister. You've done nothing but support her." "Apparently, that doesn't matter," I said quietly, emotional tiredness setting in. "Mom has been working on this for months, pitting Rebecca against me and portraying me as some kind of villain." "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked, his fingers warming against mine. I looked out the window at the city lights below, feeling hollow but also lighter, as if the worst had occurred. And now I could start to reconstruct. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I know I deserve better than this. All of this." What I didn't realize at the time was that the confrontation that evening was far from over. It was simply a prelude to what would come next. Both the depths of betrayal and the unforeseen path to mending that would unfold in the days ahead. Sleep avoided me that night. I stayed awake repeating the scene at my parents' place, dissecting every word and hunt for anything I could have misunderstood or misread. But I remember my mother's delighted smirk when she delivered. Her verdict was unequivocal. By 4 a.m., I had given up on sleep completely. Sitting at my kitchen table, a cup of tea going cold beside me, I began to list all I had done for Rebecca's wedding. The photographer's deposit was $2,500. Custom welcome hampers for out-of-town guests cost $800. The string quartet I had organized as a surprise for the ceremony cost $1,200. The list grew longer as I recalled minor charges. I discovered a vintage hairpin that matched Rebecca's grandmother's earrings, and I hired a calligrapher to do the place cards after Rebecca noted her love of hand calligraphy. The honeymoon was the highlight of my gifts to my sister and James. First-class flights to Bali cost $4,200. The private villa with ocean views costs $3,800. My special experiences included a private cooking class, a sunset cruise, and a guided trek to secret waterfalls for a total of $600. I had contributed more than $15,000 to a wedding that I was now prohibited from attending. I made my decision just as the first light of dawn broke. I opened my laptop and went to my banking app. With steady fingertips, I transferred the $8,600 honeymoon fund back into my personal account. Next, I went to the airline and resort websites and painstakingly canceled each reservation. I sent a concise, professional email to the travel agent in charge of the special experiences, stating that the arrangements had altered. My phone had been vibrating occasionally all night with incoming texts and calls, but I hadn't checked it. Now I checked my notifications. Rebecca missed 3 calls, Mom missed 12, and Dad missed 1, which is unusual. There were many texts, the majority of which were from Mom, ranging from defensive, "You're making this all about you again," to accusing, "After everything we've done for you," with no indication of remorse or reassessment. I made one last call to my credit card company. "I need to report some unauthorized charges," I told the representative. "Family members have been making purchases without my permission." It wasn't entirely accurate, but it wasn't entirely false, either. I'd never explicitly authorized my mother to use my card information for the extra wedding favors she'd ordered last month, or the upgraded linens she'd insisted on. By 7 a.m., after untangling my financial ties to Rebecca's wedding, I sent a brief email to my boss explaining my need for a personal day, then turned off my phone completely. The sudden silence felt both terrifying and liberating. I spent the morning walking through the public gardens, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. Rebecca and I had shared everything for 30 years: secrets, dreams, sorrows, and celebrations. How could she sit silently while Mom barred me from her wedding? How could she replace me with Megan, of all people? Around noon, I met my best friend Olivia for lunch. I hadn't intended to tell her everything, but one look at my face told her something was seriously wrong. "They did what?" she exclaimed when I finished explaining loudly enough that neighboring tables turned to look. "Your own mother said that to your face?" I nodded, pushing salad around my plate while not eating. And Rebecca just sat there, saying nothing. Olivia's outrage was validating after hours of self-doubt. She tried to speak once or twice, but Mom kept interrupting, and she didn't stop any of it, so I trailed off, the hurt still too raw to articulate fully. Olivia reached for my hand across the table. "Lisa, you should know. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to upset you, but now I think you need to hear it." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your mom has been saying things about you for months now." Olivia looked uncomfortable, and at Rebecca's engagement party, she told my mother that you were jealous of Rebecca's happiness. And at the Williams dinner party last month, she mentioned how concerned everyone was about your fragile emotional state and how the family was walking on eggshells around you. I looked at her, stunned. "What? Why would she say that?" "I'm not sure, but she's been planting these little seeds with everyone in your social circle." Olivia squeezed my hand. I shut it down whenever I heard it, but I'm not everywhere. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. Your controlling behavior, your need to make everything about yourself. Small comments, concerned looks, nothing malicious, just enough to give the impression that you're unstable. She hadn't just turned Rebecca against me, she'd been systematically undermining me with everyone we knew. "But why?" I whispered more to myself than to Olivia. "What does she gain from this?" "Control," Olivia simply said. "You're successful, independent, financially stable. You have what she never did. My mother always said your mother was jealous of you, even when we were kids." The pieces began to align in a new pattern, illuminating decades of small cruelties and manipulations I'd normalized or excused. The times Mom had forgotten to tell me about family events. The backhanded compliments about my career. "It's amazing. You've done so well without a husband to support you." The way she subtly reminded Rebecca of every childhood slight while glossing over everything I'd done to support and protect my sister. "I've been so blind," I finally said. "You've been a daughter who wanted to believe the best about her mother." Olivia gently corrected. "That's not blindness. That's love." By the time I returned home that afternoon, I felt different, still hurt, but clearer about what was going on and what I needed to do. I turned my phone back on and watched as notifications flooded in, totaling 28 missed calls. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. Mom's been lying to me about you for months, and James and I just found out what she did with the honeymoon reservations." The voicemails ranged from my mother's cold fury to my father's awkward attempts at peacemaking, and one message from Rebecca sent at 3:42 a.m. changed everything. "Please call me, please. I need my sister back." I stared at Rebecca's message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button without pressing it. The raw emotion in her text felt genuine, but after months of manipulation and yesterday's brutal confrontation, I wasn't ready to return to the chaos without knowing more. The other messages painted a picture of family implosion. Mom's voicemails evolved from righteously indignant to threatening. "How dare you cancel the honeymoon after promising it as a gift? You've left me with no choice but to tell everyone about your behavior," to an unconvincing attempt at reconciliation. "We can still fix this if you apologize." Dad left fewer and more muted messages. "Your mother is very upset," he stated in one background noise, implying he was calling from his car to avoid being overheard. "I had no idea about any of this until yesterday. Please call when you are available." Other family members had also began to weigh in. My Uncle Robert, who was always Mom's ally, delivered a severe sermon about honoring parents. My grandmother questioned in a trembling voice if I was all right. Clearly having gotten Mom's version of events, there were surprising sympathizers as well. Aunt Catherine, who was rarely involved in family turmoil, sent a rather strong message. "I've seen your mother do this before, Lisa. She did the same thing to me with your father. Call me. We need to talk." I decided to start there by calling my father's sister back first. "Oh, Lisa." Aunt Catherine's pleasant voice filled the line quickly. "I've been really worried. Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "Aunt Kath, I don't comprehend what's going on." Why would Mom do this? Because you threaten her, she stated plainly. You've been doing it since you were a child. So capable and independent. Deborah must be required to maintain control over everything. When that is disputed, she responds. She achieves this by turning my sister against me and preventing me from attending the wedding. Catherine sighed. She did the exact same thing to me when I was your age. Your dad and I were always close. But when he met Deborah, everything changed. She created disputes that did not exist. I told your father I had said some nasty things about her. I was not welcome to their wedding, either. I sat down, deeply digesting this revelation. Dad never told me that. Thomas has always preferred peace to confrontation, particularly with your mother. We ultimately reunited, but it was years later and never like before, her voice softened. But this isn't about the past. After chatting with Catherine, I called my best friend from college, Andrea, who worked as a therapist, and without compromising confidentiality, she assisted me in understanding the dynamics at play. I was still processing Andrea's advice when my phone rang again. The golden child scapegoat dynamic, narcissistic patterns, and triangulation had shaped my relationship with Rebecca since childhood. The most important thing, Andrea emphasized, is to protect your own boundaries while allowing Rebecca to find her way back. She, too, had been manipulated. James, Rebecca's fiancé, sounded genuinely distressed. Thank God you answered. It's been chaos here. Rebecca's been crying for hours. What happened, James? I kept my voice neutral, not ready to extend trust. We found out what your mother's been doing, the lies she's been telling, the emails she altered. Lisa, Rebecca had no idea you were excluded from dress shopping. When we confronted her, she admitted to changing the names in Rebecca's phone's contact list, as well as routing some of your texts to her own phone. We now know that your mother created fake conversations to show Rebecca, giving the impression that you were too busy or uninterested in wedding activities. The level of deliberate manipulation was staggering, but yesterday at the house, Rebecca thought that meeting was to reconcile things. Your mother told her you'd been saying horrible things about the wedding, and that you needed to hear how hurt everyone was. She never expected what actually happened, and my head was spinning. Why is she telling me this through you? Because she's afraid you'll never talk to her again, and because he hesitated. Your mother showed up to our apartment last night after you left. She was not feeling well, yelling about ungrateful children and demanding that we choose sides. It grew so terrible that neighbors contacted building security. The crisis was escalating faster than I could handle. I need to think, James. It's all too much. I understand. Just don't close the door entirely. Okay. Rebecca loves you. She has also been manipulated. I made no promises, only that I'd contact you shortly. I barely had time to process this chat before my work phone rang. It was Sandra, our office receptionist. Lisa, I apologize for bothering you on your day off, but there's a dilemma here. Your mother arrived around 20 minutes ago, requesting to see you. When I told her you weren't in, she started causing a commotion in the lobby. My professional and personal lives were merging in the worst manner. What is she doing, exactly? Making charges, telling anyone who will listen that you have stolen money from her, and that you are having a breakdown. Sandra dropped her voice. Mr. Daniels is trying to deal with it, but she's growing more unstable. I'll be right there, I said as I grabbed my keys. The 15-minute trip to my office felt like entering a war zone. Mom had never attended my office. Previously, I had displayed little interest in my profession other than how it benefited the family financially. She was now there, intent on destroying the professional reputation I had worked so hard to establish. When I arrived, security was leading my mother out of the building, and her voice could be heard throughout the lobby. You do not know what she is capable of. She has always been troubled. My face burned with humiliation as co-workers watched the spectacle unfold. Mr. Daniels, my direct supervisor, approached with concern. Lisa, take whatever time you need to handle this personal matter, he urged calmly. Your work speaks for itself. No one here is paying attention to unfounded accusations. His encouragement should have been reassuring, but the public spectacle left me feeling vulnerable and abused. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. Mom was aggressively trying to undermine the pillars of my life, including my reputation, relationships, and career. As security led my mother to the parking lot, she locked eyes with me across the lobby. Instead of the guilt or shame one might expect, I saw frigid rage and, worse, pride at having shattered my neatly planned life. Something inside of me shifted at that moment. The devastated youngster wanting maternal acceptance vanished, leaving behind a clear-eyed adult who recognized the pattern of deception for what it was. This was not love. This was not family. This was abuse. It had gone on long enough. I returned to my flat to make a decision. It was time to confront this matter once and for all, not with emotional outbursts, but with quiet, unwavering truth. I would meet with Rebecca and anyone else involved to explain what had happened and set boundaries that would safeguard my well-being in the future. It was unclear whether those boundaries included attending the wedding or keeping contact with my mother, but for the first time, I realized that I deserved better treatment than I had received, and I was ready to demand it. 2 days later, I sat at a corner table in a neutral setting, a quiet cafe midway between my apartment and Rebecca's. I arrived early to calm my worries, arranging printed evidence in a folder next to me. Screenshots of authentic texts that contradicted Mom's faked ones. Email confirmations for wedding plans I had made. Bank statements that reflect my financial contributions. Rebecca appeared alone, appearing smaller somehow. Her customary confidence waned. The dark rings under her eyes matched mine own. "Thank you for coming," she replied softly, sinking into the chair opposite me. I inquired as to why James was not joining us, having expected him following our phone talk. "He is parking the automobile. I wanted to spend a few minutes with just you first." Her hands trembled slightly as she positioned her purse next to her. "Lisa, I'm not even sure where to begin." I waited, giving her space to find her voice. This was not what I expected. Our first talk after the confrontation, although nothing in this situation had followed the usual pattern. I trusted her, Rebecca eventually murmured, her voice quivering. "Mom has been showing me texts from you for months, canceling plans, telling me you felt my wedding choices were tacky, and that you were too busy with your important profession to deal with wedding preparations." Tears rolled down her cheeks. I believed her because it was easier than imagining my mother lying so fully and deliberately. "Did she show you false texts?" I inquired, still unable to realize the scope of the deceit. Rebecca nodded and pulled out her phone. "James figured it out. Look at this." She showed me her texting app and scrolled through exchanges with me. But those weren't my words at all. Mails disparaging wedding preparations, grumbling about expenses, and making sarcastic remarks about her decisions. All credited to my number, but written in a voice that did not sound like mine. Mom had access to my phone. She made a contact using her number, but not your name. I thought I was texting you, but I was actually texting her. Then she'd respond as you. Rebecca cleaned her eyes and deleted actual messages from you. I never received half of what you sent me. The systematic nature of the deception was astounding. But what about when we met in person? Surely you could tell something was wrong. We scarcely saw each other in the last few months. Mom always had an explanation for why you couldn't attend wedding events. And when we did meet, she was always in charge of the conversation, reading whatever you said in the worst possible light afterwards. Rebecca glanced up as James approached the table. She poisoned everything. James sat down for 3 coffees before taking a seat next Rebecca. "Lisa, I am deeply sorry. I should have noticed what was happening sooner." "How did you figure this out?" I asked. James indicated that the honeymoon cancellation served as a tipping point. Rebecca was confused when she received the notification because she was unaware of the Bali vacation. "Your mother said you promised this extravagant honeymoon but canceled it out of spite after being rightfully excluded from the wedding." "But that made no sense," Rebecca added. "Why would you spend thousands of dollars on a honeymoon for us if you were as resentful as Mom claimed?" So we began digging, checking her phone records and comparing message timestamps, James explained. When we started looking for irregularities, the entire fabrication fell apart. The last confirmation came when we discovered a folder on your mother's iPad. She'd been taking screenshots of her own made-up talks, most likely to keep her tail straight. I pushed the folder across the table. I presented my own evidence. Bank transactions, original emails, and everything. Rebecca and James' emotions changed from shock to fear to wrath as they read through the paperwork. The contrast between my actual words and deeds and what my mother had depicted could not have been sharper. "That day at your parents' place," James explained. "Rebecca assumed we were meeting to clear the air over miscommunications. She had no notion your mother was trying to exclude you from the wedding." Rebecca acknowledged. I froze, with humiliation in her voice. When Mom started speaking such dreadful things, pretending that we were all in agreement, I was shocked. "You had already left before I could grasp what was going on." Her hand reached for mine across the table. "Lisa, I never agreed to exclude you from my wedding. Never. You're my sister and my dearest friend. I can't get married without you present." The affirmation of my experience elicited unexpected emotions. For months, I'd been pushed to question my own opinions and worth within my family. "We need to talk about Mom," I added, now that I could trust my voice again. "This is not normal behavior. This is a purposeful, calculated manipulation." "It gets worse," James stated solemnly. "After you left that night, Rebecca confronted your mother. The thing she said, the venom, it was like watching someone transform into a different person." Rebecca nodded. She admitted to everything, but with no remorse. "She said she was protecting me from your negative influence. When I said I wanted you back in the wedding, she threatened to withdraw all financial support and inform everyone in the family that I was having a pre-wedding breakdown." I murmured, "Just like what she's been saying about me," and James confirmed that it's a pattern she uses to discredit anyone who challenges her. We spent the next hour mapping out the full extent of my mother's manipulation, the altered texts, the diverted invitations, the rumors spread throughout our social circle, and the financial control. I've arranged a meeting with Dad, Aunt Catherine, and a few other family members who need to hear the truth, a neutral family intervention of sorts. "When?" Rebecca asked. "Tomorrow evening. Will you come?" She nodded without hesitation. Each revelation built on the last, painting a comprehensive picture of calculated emotional abuse spanning decades. Of course. It's time everyone understood the truth. The family gathering the next evening was both unpleasant and important. We met in Aunt Catherine's living room. Myself, Rebecca, and James, Dad, Aunt Catherine, and Uncle Paul, and our maternal grandmother Martha, who had particularly requested to be there after getting worried calls from Mom. I presented the evidence systematically and without passion. Fake texts, financial records, and eyewitness testimonies of Mom's public behavior. Catherine had similar memories from decades ago. James reported his mother's outburst at their flat. Dad remained silent for the majority of the presentation, his face turning gray as the evidence accumulated. When he finally spoke, it was hardly audible. "I knew some of it," he said. "Not to the same extent, but enough to make me wish I had acted sooner." He stared at me, his eyes full of regret. "I chose peace above defending you. I'm deeply sorry, Lisa." Mom arrived last, having been informed that this was a wedding budget talk. Her confident entrance was dashed when she noticed the collected group and the evidence sprawled across the coffee table. "What is this?" she questioned, her gaze flitting between faces. "A chance for truth," I stated simply. What happened was both expected and heartbreaking. Initial denial, claims of conspiracy against her, and tries to garner allies using traditional manipulation tactics. When those failed, wrath became cold and cutting, then heated and uncontrollable, and ultimately, when confronted with indisputable evidence, tears and protestations of misunderstanding and only wanting what was best for the family. She declared, "I will not be treated this way," as everyone remained unaffected by her performance. Rebecca interjected, standing to confront our mother straight, after everything I had done for this family in preparation for Rebecca's wedding. "Lisa will be my maid of honor, just as I always wanted. If you can't accept that and treat her with respect, you'll have a very limited position in both the wedding and our future lives." Mom's face distorted with horror. "You'd prefer her over your own mother." Rebecca responded calmly, "I choose truth over manipulation. I choose health over toxins. Your father will never accept it." Mom turned to face Dad. Her expression conveyed her expectations. For possibly the first time in their marriage, Dad refused to give in to keep the peace. "Deborah, enough. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at the proof. This is the end of it." The intervention did not conclude with a simple resolution. Mom stormed out, threatening us with the repercussions of our treason. But something essential had changed. The pattern of manipulation had been uncovered, identified, and rejected by people it was intended to control. In terms of problematic family members and wedding dynamics, we were a long way from the finish line. But, for the first time, I felt like we were all headed in the same direction. Honesty and stronger relationships, regardless of what it meant for the wedding, which is just a few weeks away. The week before Rebecca's wedding, a fragile new normal emerged within our divided family. Mom had tried a number of different strategies following the intervention. Icy silence, anguished appeals for understanding, rage-filled accusations, and finally, a grudging outward acceptance of the new boundaries we'd set. Dad had astonished us all by firmly supporting Rebecca's choice to reinstate me as maid of honor. After decades of choosing peace over confrontation, he appeared to have discovered a store of strength that none of us realized he possessed. "I should have protected you both long ago," he told me during a private talk on my apartment balcony with city lights glittering below us. I convinced myself that saying nothing was the same as preserving the peace. I was mistaken. "Why now, Dad?" I inquired gently. "What changed?" He stared into his coffee cup for a long minute. Seeing it all put out like that, the purposeful aspect of it, I couldn't hide from it anymore. "And honestly, Lisa, I'm weary. Weary of walking on eggshells and pretending everything is fine when it isn't." Rebecca and I had been rebuilding our relationship day by day, our bond bruised but not broken, talking through the manipulations that had driven us apart and mourning the months of sisterhood we'd lost. This new version of my father, willing to admit hard truths, apologize, and change, gave me hope that genuine transformation was possible. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if James hadn't discovered those fake texts," she said during one of our reconciliation brunches, restored to their rightful place in our weekly routines. "Let's not think about that," I suggested, squeezing her hand across the table. "We're here now." As for Mom, the family had presented her with clear terms. Rebecca had firmly stated that if she refused to accept these conditions, she would only be able to attend the wedding as a guest, with no say in any aspects of the ceremony or reception. She would also be barred from making any unilateral decisions, having private conversations with vendors, or attempting to isolate or manipulate any of the family members. To everyone's astonishment, Mom eventually agreed, but her cooperation appeared more opportunistic than real. The truth was revealed by the sparks of hatred in her eyes, which were immediately hidden by fake pleasantness. My own experience with this event had been transforming in unforeseen ways. The initial sadness had given way to understanding regarding familial patterns that I had accepted for too long. Working with a therapist who specializes in family trauma, I began to realize patterns of enabling and people-pleasing in my own conduct that had left me open to manipulation. "Your worth is not determined by what you provide for others," Dr. Marshall reminded me during an especially challenging session. "Not financially, emotionally, or practically." These words became a mantra as wedding preparations neared completion. I resumed my duty as maid of honor with a renewed sense of boundaries. Yes, I would coordinate the bridesmaids and help Rebecca with last-minute things. No, I would not exhaust my savings or jeopardize my health to control everyone else's feelings. I had also rebooked a modified version of Rebecca and James' honeymoon package, which was still substantial but scaled to reflect my new concept of healthy giving. When I presented them with a new itinerary, I explained that it was a free gift with no conditions attached. This is not a payment for inclusion or affection. The wedding day itself was sunny and clear, a welcome contrast to the emotional storms of the previous months. The ceremony was set for 4:00 p.m. at the Clayton Hotel, saving the morning and early afternoon for preparations. Mom kept her commitment, despite the obvious hardship on her. Her interactions with me were brief, but courteous. Her attention was drawn to portraying the part of mother of the bride correctly for the assembled guests. As I assisted Rebecca into her wedding gown, which I had not been present to watch her choose, I felt a sudden sense of loss for the simple joy this day should have brought. Rebecca observed my expression in the mirror. "I wish we could erase the last few months," she whispered softly. "I don't," I startled myself by saying. As painful as it was, it brought truth into the open. "We can build something healthier now," she turned to face me, radiant in ivory lace. "When did my big sister get so wise?" "Probably around the time my little sister got so brave," I replied, carefully adjusting her veil. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, and I stood proudly beside Rebecca, holding her bouquet as she and James exchanged heartfelt vows. As guests mingled during cocktail hour, I found myself alone near the gift table, adjusting some displaced cards. Mom sat in the front row beside Dad, her composure impeccable, her eyes occasionally meeting mine with unreadable emotion. "The calligraphy is beautiful." Mom's voice came from behind me. "That was your doing, wasn't it?" I turned, braced for criticism disguised as a compliment, but her expression held something I rarely saw directed at me, genuine appreciation. "Yes," I answered simply. Rebecca mentioned her love of hand lettering, so Mom nodded, and an awkward silence stretched between us. "The therapist Catherine suggested," Mom continued, looking anywhere but at me, "says I need to practice acknowledging others' strengths without feeling diminished by them." A brief, humorless laugh followed. "You've always noticed those details about people, what they like, what they care about. I never had that gift. Apparently, I have work to do in that area." "You're seeing a therapist?" I couldn't keep the surprise out of my voice. "Your father insisted after everything." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I don't expect this to fix things between us. I know it will take time, if it's even possible, but I'm trying." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a transformation, but it was a tiny crack in the fortress of denial she'd built around herself, and that was enough for today. 1 month after the wedding, our family began tentative group therapy sessions, which Mom attended reluctantly at first, then with increasing willingness, as the framework provided her with acceptable ways to express her needs without manipulation. Dad gradually found his voice, speaking truths that had been suppressed. Rebecca and I strengthened our sisterhood, which was now built on mutual respect rather than codependent patterns, and my own healing journey continued independently. I established clearer boundaries in all relationships, not just with family, and learned to recognize when my helping veered into unhealthy territory. Tyler had been my rock throughout the situation, and his steady support had never wavered. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, during a weekend trip to our favorite mountain overlook, he proposed. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "but with one condition." He raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Our wedding planning stays between us. Small committee, clear boundaries, no drama." His laughter echoed across the valley below us. "Deal." Life continued to evolve in the years that followed. Mom's progress came in fits and starts, with some days showing genuine growth and others falling back into old patterns. Rebecca and James welcomed their first child, making me an aunt to a little girl whose middle name, Lisa, brought tears to my eyes. Dad discovered a newfound confidence that revitalized not only his marriage, but his long-deferred personal interests. I also learned, perhaps the most important lesson of all, that forgiveness does not necessitate forgetting. That boundaries are not barriers to love, but rather foundations for its healthiest expression, and that standing firm in your own worth is not selfish, but essential. The journey from that devastating night when my mother said those cruel words, to where I am now, was not direct or easy. It took courage to confront painful truths, wisdom to distinguish healthy relationships from toxic ones, and strength to demand the respect I deserved. If you're dealing with similar family issues or painful exclusions, remember that sometimes the most difficult boundaries to establish are the ones that ultimately lead to healing. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to stand up to family manipulation or set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you find the courage to value yourself when others couldn't see it? Please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and please remember that your story is also important as we negotiate these hard human experiences together.